When I first saw the ad, I thought it was a joke. Night librarian needed. Must be comfortable working alone. Discretion required, cash weekly, no digital devices allowed on premises. No experience necessary. That was the part that got me. I was broke, no job, eviction notice taped to the door. So, yeah, when I saw the flyer on the cracked corkboard at the gas station, I tore it down like it might vanish. The place was called Wormwood Library. Never heard of it. Google didn't turn up anything either, but it had a listed address, just off a dead-end road near the edge of town. That should have been my first red flag. I showed up just before dusk. The building sat like a sleeping beast. A stone structure with Gothic arches, half buried behind thorned hedges and ivy-choked walls. No signage, no lights, just a tall iron door with a lion's head knocker. I hesitated, hand hovering above the handle. The wind hissed through the trees, and for a second I almost turned around. But desperation's louder than fear. The door creaked open before I even knocked. A man stood inside, mid-60s, thin, wearing a wool vest and fingerless gloves. His eyes were milky, blind, I thought, but he looked directly at me. "You're here for the night post," he said, not asking. "Come in." I stepped inside. The air changed immediately. Warm, dry, still, like stepping out of time. Books lined every inch of the walls, ancient volumes, thick tomes, scrolls sealed in glass. The scent of parchment and wax filled the air. I hadn't seen a single light outside, but inside, hundreds of candle sconces flickered steadily. The man introduced himself only as Mr. Bell. "You'll tend the third floor tonight," he said, handing me a heavy ring of bronze keys. "There are rules, 6 of them. Read them carefully. Disobeying them is unwise." He handed me a folded paper, yellowed and crackling at the edges. I opened it and read, "Rules for the third floor. Wormwood Library. Do not rearrange any books, even if they fall on their own. If you find a book already open, do not read aloud. Close it quietly and walk away. At midnight, the lights will flicker. If a red book appears on the nearest shelf, do not touch it. Do not look at the title. If you hear someone ask for help from between the stacks, do not respond. If a book follows you, you'll know what this means. Return it to the black alcove on the east wall. Do not stay past 4 a.m. The doors will close. You will not be able to leave." I read it twice. "Some of our collections are temperamental," Bell said, his tone flat. "Follow the rules, and they'll mostly leave you alone." "Mostly?" He smiled, or tried to. It looked more like a twitch. "Your shift ends at 3:45 a.m. If the clock in the North Hall stops ticking, leave immediately. No questions. Understood?" I nodded. The third floor was a narrow staircase up, stone steps worn smooth by what must have been centuries of use. The lights dimmed as I ascended, replaced by oil lamps and brass cages. The third floor was different. Smaller, dustier. Bookshelves ran taller here, stretching into darkness. There was no visible ceiling, just shadows. A long hallway split the center, with reading tables set beneath arched windows that looked out onto nothing but black. I made my rounds. The silence was absolute. Not peaceful, more like waiting, like the books were listening. Around 11 p.m., I passed a book that hadn't been there earlier. Thick red leather, no title. I felt drawn to it, but I remembered Rule 3, no red books. I turned away. That's when I heard it. A whisper, faint, from the end of the row. "Please, help me." It was a child's voice, software desperate. I froze, my stomach turned ice. "Hello?" it said again. "Rule 4. If you hear someone ask for help from between the stacks, do not respond. I backed away slowly, my heart hammering in my chest. The voice continued, pleading, repeating the same 2 words, "Help me," softer each time, like it was fading into mist. I returned to the central table, gripping the rule sheet like a talisman. Somewhere in the shadows, a book slid off a shelf behind me. A soft thud, then another, and another. I didn't turn around. I didn't sleep after that first shift. Even after I left the library and stepped into the pre-dawn cold, the silence followed me home. Thick and too still, like I'd dragged a piece of wormwood back with me. I sat in bed, fully dressed, the rule sheet unfolded beside me. My mind kept circling one line. If a book follows you, you'll know what this means. What the hell does that even mean? I tried to tell myself it was just a creepy atmosphere, just an old place full of strange smells and weirder stories. But something had changed in me. The silence wasn't just external, it was internal now too, like part of me had gone quiet to make room for something else. My second night began the same way. 11:30 p.m. arrival. Mr. Bell was waiting by the iron door. He didn't ask how the first night went, just nodded and handed me the key ring again. "Third floor is yours," he said. "Do not leave early, and do not attempt to access the 4th floor." I blinked. I thought there were only 3. He tilted his head, eyes milky and blank. "There are, until there aren't." That was it. No further explanation. I took the keys and climbed the staircase again. The 3rd floor greeted me like it remembered me. Same stale air, same unlit ceiling above the looming bookshelves. A grandfather clock in the center of the reading area ticked solemnly, its pendulum swinging with unnerving precision. I started my rounds, walking the same path as before, but something was off. Halfway down the west aisle, I stopped short. There was a book in the middle of the walkway, open. Its pages fluttered slightly, though there was no breeze. Rule 2. If you find a book already open, do not read aloud. Close it quietly and walk away. My pulse picked up. I knelt slowly, careful not to look directly at the text, but curiosity is a powerful thing. Just one glance, I thought. The page showed a drawing, hand-sketched, finely detailed. It was me, standing exactly where I stood now, kneeling beside a book. I slammed it shut. The thud echoed across the entire floor. Somewhere behind me, another book fell. I walked away quickly, resisting every urge to look at the shelves. Every book now felt like it was breathing, waiting for my eyes to land on them. At midnight sharp, the lights flickered. I froze. I turned to the nearest shelf. There it was again. The red book, same spot as the night before, but now closer to the center table. The same deep crimson leather, no title, no dust. Rule 3. If a red book appears on the nearest shelf, do not touch it. Do not look at the title. I turned away fast. My skin crawled. I sat at the central table, keeping my eyes forward. I tried to hum something to fill the silence, anything to block out the sense of being watched. That's when I noticed the book, sitting on the table in front of me. Closed, old. The cover had no words, just a circular mark burned into the leather like a seal. It hadn't been there before, and I hadn't brought it. I pushed back from the table, heart pounding. Slowly, I stood and moved down the aisle, trying to ignore it. But when I turned the corner, there it was again. On the nearest shelf, same book, same burnt circle. Following me. I grabbed the rule sheet from my pocket. If a book follows you, you'll know what this means. Return it to the black alcove on the east wall. I didn't know what the black alcove was. I hadn't seen anything like it on my first night, but I hadn't explored far either. The book appeared again as I rounded another corner, sitting atop a pile of dusty dictionaries like it was waiting for me. I had no choice. I made my way to the east side of the third floor. The shelves grew older here, some warped, some missing whole sections. The titles became harder to read. Older languages. Some books had no spines at all, just bound parchment and wax seals. And then I saw it. The black alcove. It wasn't a shelf. It was a recessed cavity in the wall, no taller than a cupboard, lined with black stone. Inside were a dozen books stacked haphazardly, some with strange markings, others with locks. The book in my hands grew warm. I placed it inside carefully. The moment I let go, the temperature dropped. A whisper passed by my ear, unintelligible and cold. Then, silence, true silence. No ticking clock, no flickering candle. Just stillness, until the whisper returned. Louder, but not from the alcove, from behind me. Turn around. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. The voice had weight, not just sound, but pressure, like the air behind me had thickened, watching me, daring me. Turn around. Rule 4 burned in my mind like a warning flare. If you hear someone ask for help from between the stacks, do not respond. The voice wasn't asking for help this time, though. It was commanding, sharper, hungrier. I backed away from the black alcove slowly, every muscle tense, resisting the instinct to run. The third floor of Wormwood didn't like sudden movements. That much I'd already learned. The hallway behind me hissed as the gas lamps flickered, casting quick, jerking shadows across the book-lined walls. I kept my eyes forward, hands trembling at my sides. The whisper came again, more insistent. "Turn around, please." It sounded different this time. Familiar. My breath caught in my throat. It was my mother's voice, or something pretending to be her. I almost broke, almost turned, but something deep in me knew whatever was back there, whatever wore her voice, wasn't real. I closed my eyes, took one slow breath, and walked back toward the center table. The rule sheet crinkled in my fist like a holy relic. When I reached the table again, the red book was gone. The clock had resumed its ticking. I'd survived the first 2 hours. Barely. At 1:30 a.m., I resumed my patrols, this time more cautious. I kept my hands behind my back. I didn't touch anything. I didn't even read the titles anymore. It was during the third loop down the north corridor that I saw the figure. At first, I thought it was just another tall shadow. But then it moved. A man, or the outline of one, sitting at a reading table just beyond the central arch. Pale, hunched over an open book, unmoving except for his fingers, which slowly turned one page, then another, and another. I stopped cold. He hadn't been there before. I was sure of it. Rule 1, do not rearrange any books, even if they fall on their own. Rule 2, if you find a book already open, do not read aloud. Rule 3, read book, do not touch. Rule 4, ignore the voice. Rule 5, return the follower. Rule 6, there was no rule about readers. I approached slowly, unsure if I was supposed to interact or avoid. Maybe he was a real person, a researcher, a historian. But then I got close enough to see his eyes, or rather, where his eyes should have been. Empty sockets, not bloody or gory, just hollow, clean, polished bone peeking through thin, paper-like skin. He didn't look up. He didn't acknowledge me. He just kept reading. Flip, flip, flip. The book in front of him was massive, bound in black hide, its pages yellow and brittle. Every time he turned one, the candle nearest him dimmed, like the page absorbed the light. I tried to back away, but the moment I moved, his head twitched. Not turned. Twitched. A sharp, mechanical jolt to the left, like a broken marionette. I froze. He sniffed the air, and then he spoke. His voice was soft, papery, like pages rubbing together. I'm still hungry. My stomach dropped. He wasn't speaking to me, not directly, but the way his fingers paused on the next page, the way his neck started to twist, I knew. I was next. I turned and walked, brisk, not frantic, down the corridor, not running, not drawing attention. Behind me, the pages flipped faster. Flip, 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 flip. Then silence. When I glanced back, the figure was gone. The chair was still warm. I hurried to the nearest wall and leaned against it, sweat trickling down my neck. I'd broken no rules, at least none listed, but I had a horrible suspicion that there were more rules than I'd been given, ones you only discovered when it was too late. The rest of the night blurred. Time stretched and snapped. Sometimes the clock ticked normally, sometimes it sped up. At one point, I saw a shadow cast by nothing, curling around the leg of a reading table before slipping away. And then I heard it again. Not words this time. A sound. Breathing. Not mine. It was shallow, wet, like someone struggling to exhale through soaked lungs. I looked up, and there, above the central table, perched upside down on the rafters like a bat, was the reader. He didn't move. He just watched. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I just whispered, 3:45, come faster. By 2 a.m., I was barely holding it together. The reader was gone. One moment, he hung like a corpse above the reading table. The next, he wasn't there, like he'd never been. The candles had dimmed to a sickly hue, flickering as if blown by a breath I couldn't feel. Even the grandfather clock ticked slower now, like the library was winding down. I paced the third floor, careful to avoid the east wall and the alcove. That book had followed me once. I wasn't going to give it another reason. But something gnawed at me. Mr. Bell's warning before my shift echoed like a taunt. There are 3 floors until there aren't. I told myself I wouldn't go looking. But then the south wall changed. It was subtle, the kind of change you wouldn't notice unless you'd memorized the layout. A shelf was missing, gone. In its place, a narrow doorway I was certain hadn't been there before. Arched, shadowed. No door, just a black hallway that sloped gently upward. I should have walked away. I should have stuck to the rules. But curiosity's a parasite. It digs in and whispers. I crept forward, candle in hand. The air in the hallway was dry, crackling with static, and the further I moved, the quieter everything became. No ticking, no breath. Just that stillness again, the one that makes your skin crawl like you're being unwrapped from the inside. At the top of the passage was a wooden door. Smooth, seamless, but covered in writing. Names scratched into the surface with hundreds of tiny cuts. Some were familiar. One of them was mine. I froze. My breath caught. I hadn't written it. But there it was. The door creaked open on its own. A staircase spiraled upward, carved entirely from books. Not stone, not wood. Books. Their spines cracked as I stepped onto them, each one whispering softly as if protesting my weight. I counted the steps, 33 in total. At the top, the 4th floor. It didn't look like the others. No shelves, no tables, just a long, circular chamber with one enormous book at the center, like a pulpit. It pulsed with a faint blue glow. Not light, exactly. More like presence. I shouldn't have been there. I knew it in my bones. But I walked toward the book anyway, drawn to it like a flame to a moth. It had no title, no pages, not in the way I expected. Just endless parchment, unfolding like a scroll across the pedestal. And it was writing itself, line after line in shimmering ink. I leaned in, heart racing. It was a list of events, specific ones. My first night at the library, the red book, the whisper, the book that followed me, the reader, all described in detail. Then it shifted, writing events I hadn't seen yet. He will look into the mirror at 3:10 a.m. He will hear his own voice from the stacks. He will be offered a choice: leave the library or remain in its service. Forever. I stepped back. The candle in my hand flared, then snuffed itself out. The room darkened, and something behind me whispered in my voice, "You were never hired. You were chosen." I bolted, down the stairs, through the name-scratched door, into the third floor, which now felt foreign, as if I'd crossed into another version of it. The candles were still lit, but the books were rearranged. The reader's table was gone. The grandfather clock ticked backward. I ran to the east wall, half expecting the alcove to be gone, or worse, open. But it was there, silent and sealed. The rule sheet burned in my pocket like a warning. This library wasn't just a place, it was a trap disguised as a building, a maze that tested you one rule at a time until you slipped, until you broke. I stumbled back to the central table, eyes scanning the shelves, and that's when I saw the red book. But this time, it was open, lined neatly on the table. The page facing me showed my face, eyes wide, mouth mid-scream, and underneath it, 3:33 a.m. I turned to check the clock. It had stopped ticking. The pendulum was still. The hands pointed directly at 3:33. Rule 6 slammed into my mind like a siren. Do not stay past 4 a.m. The doors will close. You will not be able to leave. But I wasn't worried about 4 o'clock anymore. I was worried about what happened at 3:33, and I had no idea what that would be. 3:33 a.m. The clock wasn't broken, it was waiting. Every rule so far had been a warning, a test. But this one felt like a countdown, as if everything led to this moment. I stood frozen in front of the red book, the one that now dared to open itself. My image was still there, but the face on the page had changed. Its mouth now sewn shut with silver thread, its eyes hollowed into inky pools. Beneath the drawing, a new line had appeared, scrawled in frantic, slanted letters. You spoke when you shouldn't have. I backed away. I hadn't spoken to anyone. Had I? Then I remembered the whisper, the voice behind me, my mother's voice. I hadn't spoken to it, but I'd whispered to myself, a single word. 3:45. Come faster. Did that count? The book turned a page on its own. A single sentence wrote itself in thick black ink. That was enough. The ground trembled, just slightly, and the lights dimmed into red. Not candlelight, something else entirely, like the floorboards were bleeding heat. And then came the sound. Not footsteps, not whispers, breathing, everywhere, heavy, labored, rhythmic, inhale, exhale, like something massive had just woken up beneath the library floor. I stumbled backward, only to crash into a bookshelf, which groaned like it was alive. The books shuddered on their shelves. Some began to slide out, falling open mid-air, their pages flapping like wings. And every single one was blank. No words, no titles, just empty parchment, page after page, screaming in silence. Then the reader returned. He emerged from between the shelves, dragging something behind him. It was another version of me. I couldn't process it, not fully, but the figure being pulled, limp, eyes open, lips sewn with silver thread, wore my clothes, my face, my expression of silent terror. "You've already failed once," the reader rasped. "You just don't remember." I turned and ran. I don't know what direction. I just moved. Past the eastern corridor, past the spot where the alcove used to be but wasn't anymore. The shelves were shifting again, the layout of the floor changing like a dream, melting into a nightmare. I passed doors that hadn't been there before. Narrow black thresholds that whispered promises in languages I didn't understand. One door breathed fog. Another pulsed with soft laughter. One opened just a crack, and I saw hundreds of fingers stretching from the darkness beyond. I didn't stop. Eventually, I reached the northern hall where the clock had once stood. It was gone. In its place stood a tall mirror, rimmed in tarnished gold and carved with runes that shimmered like fresh ink. I remembered the prophecy from the 4th floor, from the massive book writing my future. He will look into the mirror at 3:10 a.m. But this wasn't 3:10. It was still 3:33. The time had never changed. I looked into the mirror, and it looked back. But the reflection wasn't me. It was the version the reader had dragged, mouth sewn, eyes void, but alive. The moment our eyes met, it smiled. Its sewn mouth twisted upward, the threads stretching and tearing with wet snaps as its jaw split open in silence. "Switch," it mouthed. My chest seized. I stepped back, and it stepped forward. The mirror shimmered, warping. My skin burned as cold air slammed into me like a wall of ice. The reflection moved again, faster now, until its hand pressed against the glass. Only there was no glass. Its hand came through. I screamed and turned, bolting from the hallway, knocking over books, dodging shelves that leaned and groaned like they were trying to collapse onto me. I could hear the mirror shattering behind me. I didn't dare look. The library roared, a low, grinding groan of stone and wood that made the walls vibrate. Books exploded off the shelves. Pages filled the air like paper birds caught in a hurricane. Through the chaos, I heard Mr. Bell's voice. Not in my ear, in my mind. "You were never hired. You were shelved." I reached the staircase, the one leading back down to the 2nd floor, but it was gone. In its place stood a massive black archway, pulsing, breathing, and from inside it, a hand reached out. Not the reader's, not the reflections, mine. Another version of me, drenched in ink, whispering without lips, "Let me in." The library wasn't testing me anymore. It was replacing me. I backed away from the archway, every instinct in my body screaming to flee. But there was nowhere left to go. The 3rd floor was unrecognizable now. Shelves bent at impossible angles, warping like melting wax. The floor no longer felt solid under my feet, pulsing instead with each breath of the structure, like I was standing on the chest of something sleeping beneath the wood. No, not sleeping, stirring. The archway pulsed again, and the version of me inside it stepped forward, fully visible now, naked, covered in pages that clung to his body like flesh, some still wet with ink. His face wasn't entirely mine anymore. It had changed. Lips gone, eyes hollow, yet his expression mirrored one thing perfectly: desperation. "It has to be you," he rasped without sound. "You stayed past 3:33. You broke the page." Behind him, the pages of the library screamed. Yes, screamed. Not whispered, not rustled. Screamed. They howled through the corridors as if thousands of voices had been pressed flat into paper, all crying out at once. I turned and ran again, this time not toward an exit. There wasn't one, but toward the only place that might still follow rules. The black alcove, if it even existed anymore. I ran east, following the layout I remembered from earlier nights, leaping over shattered bookcases and dodging hands that slithered between the shelves like vines. The ceiling was gone now, or infinite, an ever-rising tower of shelves that reached into nothing. Then, at the far end of a collapsing corridor, I saw it. The black alcove. Still there, but not empty. The red book sat inside it now, open, its pages flipping wildly, faster than any wind could justify. Each page showed another version of me, screaming, burning, choking, begging, thousands of outcomes all ending the same way, replaced. I stepped forward, gripping the edge of the alcove. "This place doesn't let you leave," a voice whispered behind me. "It shelves you, writes you in, until you fit." I turned. The reader. He was closer now, arms longer, fingers bent like quills. Behind him, the ink-slick version of me stood silently, watching. They were waiting for me to choose. The book began to write again. A blank page, and then, he offers himself. He becomes the story. The others remain locked. I understood then. The library didn't just keep knowledge, it bound it. Every worker, every voice, every memory, written into the structure like chapters. Some were volunteers. Most were not. But someone had to go in to keep the others out. That was the rule that hadn't been written. The real, final rule: a shelf must always be full. A story must always be told. The book flipped to one last page. A blank one. No ink, just a place where something or someone needed to go. And the reflection stepped toward me. It didn't lunge, it didn't attack, it offered its hand. A quill formed in its fingers, an invitation. And I, God help me, I took it. Just long enough to write my name. Everything stopped, the breathing, the screaming, the collapse. The reader vanished into dust. The inked version of me smiled, a real smile this time, and stepped backward into the alcove. The moment he did, the walls began to knit themselves together. Shelves realigned, books flew back into place, candles reignited with soft golden light. The floor was still. The clock ticked again. 3:44 a.m. 1 minute left. The archway gone. I sprinted across the floor, down the spiral staircase that now looked like a staircase again, not a spine of bound manuscripts, past the shelves, past the red book, which was now closed and sealed in iron bands. At the bottom of the steps, I reached the main door. It was open. The outside air hit me like a baptism. Cold, real, sharp. I didn't even close the door behind me. I ran across the lawn, past the hedges, through the gates, and into a sunrise I'd never expected to see again. It's been 6 days. I haven't gone back. No calls, no paychecks, no Mr. Bell I've driven past where the library was. It isn't there anymore. Just a broken stretch of trees and a crumbling stone archway with no door behind it. But last night, I found something on my front porch, wrapped in twine, old, heavy, a book, no title, only one page inside, blank except for the words, "Thank you for your service. We will call again when the shelves are empty." I burned it, but I still dream in pages now, and every dream ends the same way. The clock hits 3:33, and the door creaks open.